Welcome to Feeding the Family with Dr. Kristen, where we help you navigate the challenges of feeding your family and learn about the role food plays in our health and relationships. Feeding and food relationships can be stressful, confusing, and even destructive. I'm Kristen Saxena, a pediatrician and mother of 4 who's been researching and sharing what I've learned about feeding for over 10 years. In this podcast, I'll share my experience and expertise to help our kids and ourselves with everyday survival tips for real parents. This podcast is about progress, not perfection. So let's get started. Welcome back to Feeding the Family with Dr. Kristen. I'm your host, Kristen Saxena. On today's episode, we will be talking about breastfeeding, and I'm joined by 2 of my very good friends, Melissa and Diana, and they're going to talk to us about their own experience with breastfeeding their own kids that are now all grown up. So now that they've exited this phase of their life, they're going to share with us the words of wisdom that they have as seasoned mamas. All right, so today I am welcoming to the show 2 of my very dear friends, Missy and Diana. So Missy, I have known you for a really long time.
A really long time.
Yes, we met in high school. So our husbands, current husbands, are...
Current husbands.
Make of that what you will.
That's
true. Our husbands were best friends in high school.
Yes.
And so even in our very young days, I met you and we hung out in high school and did all of the crazy high school things.
Absolutely.
So I guess where I was going with that was our then boyfriends are now our husbands.
Yes.
And still like best of friends and own a business together. So our lives have been intertwined for
too
centuries.
many years to count. Let's
we
not
won't
even talk about it.
So
yes.
what, like 4 years now?
Yes.
No.
Yeah. Yes. And even our kids are friends now too, which is so neat to
Absolutely.
just see it all come together. So
yes. So huge part of my life. And then I actually had the pleasure of meeting Diana through you because you 2 were sorority sisters in college. Mm-hmm. So I feel like when we had moved to Minnesota for a few years and then we came back and kind of got to intermix with your friends that you had through college that were living locally. So really got to know you. And now that has been quite a while as well. Like at least 10 years.
I was going to say, I'm not sure that we're really counting years, but it's been a while.
It's been a long time.
Yep.
So had the pleasure of kind of like going through all of the young baby years, I guess, kind of in camaraderie with the 2 of you.
Yep. Yes.
So I thought it would be fun we've been doing a lot of episodes about breastfeeding. And so wanted to just have an episode where we could all kind of chat the real deal about what we remember. Because the other part is, I think, sometimes you can best reflect on it once you're out of it.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So kind of a looking back and just discussing our own experiences and takeaways from the years of breastfeeding.
Mm-hmm. Which, when you asked me to do this, I said that was the years that I blocked out.
Yeah, and I think that's part of it.
I intentionally tried to not remember those times because of the difficulty of them.
Well, I think that's a good point. The sleep deprivation and trauma. I honestly have not great. I don't mean like negative. I just don't remember a lot of stuff from when my kids were really little. And I just assume it was like survival mode and just sleep deprivation.
It's a little bit of a blur.
Totally.
Absolutely. Yes.
Totally.
I'm one of those people though that actually really liked breastfeeding. I didn't love the pumping part of it because I pumped a ton, but the part where you're kind of bonding with your baby and breastfeeding actually came pretty easily to me, luckily, because I had twins first and then I had one. And so that was a situation with the twins. But I actually loved the bonding part of it. That part I loved. But I mean, there was a lot it's a lot.
Yeah, well, and I think that's kind of also, I love this because like I would say, I mean, obviously everyone has the ups and downs through the whole process. But overall, you would say like that was something that you really loved.
Overall, I loved it. Yes, I thought it was awesome bonding time for just me and the babies, even if it was 2 a.m. or whatever it was. Like that was our special time. And so I did love that part of it. But yeah, obviously there's some people who did not love it so much.
Right.
So,
Like
and that's okay.
yourself. Yes.
Absolutely.
And I felt like I was totally middle ground depending on the kid and the situation. Like I was never, I mean, there were moments where I was just like, oh, I love this. And I think especially actually with my first, it was like a total love-hate because I was a resident, so I was working all the time. And so really like that was my time to spend with him. But on the flip side, it was also not easy for me and very stressful. Like I put way too much stress on myself about it. So it was sort of this like love-hate even within like with one child where it was like, this is wonderful. And then on the other hand, it was like the source of way too much anxiety. So maybe the first part would be to just have you guys kind of briefly walk through, like talk about your family, how many kids you have, and just sort of the synopsis of what you would call your breastfeeding experience with them.
Yeah. So I had twins, a boy and a girl. They actually just turned 9 yesterday, which is crazy. We were just relaying their whole birth story to them, and they just got a huge kick out of it. And then I have an almost 3-year-old. So I would say having twins is an experience in itself. And being kind of a modest person, too, I feel like that all goes out the window once you give birth. And then knowing after I had twins, I wanted to breastfeed. And so, having the nurse come in, you basically just whip out the boobs and say, show me what I'm doing here. And I'm doing 2 at once. So that was a little stressful too.
I remember that. I was like amazed.
Yeah. They basically said you have to do 2 at once because what will happen is you'll feed one, wrap that baby, put that baby down, and then the other baby will want to eat. So had to get one going, then you had to get the other going and just kind of, and obviously it was difficult in the beginning, but once I got a rhythm, it was easy, and that was what I knew
at first, right?
Yeah,
I remember the first days.
Yeah.
I mean, because how do you?
Yeah,
if I get
like,
one on,
this
I'd be like, that one's still way over there.
And then my husband Abe was like, "Okay, put this one on, get me all adjusted here, bring me my drinks, bring me my M&Ms." He was my snack person. But So once we got a rhythm, it was all good. I did feel like I was tied to the couch or the chair a good majority of the first 6 months. But that was what it was. And I do feel something my mom told me said, like, this is temporary.
Yes.
This is temporary. And I think that's a really important thing to remember because when you're in that moment or in that season, it feels endless and like an eternity. And so I really did try to enjoy the moment, remember it's temporary, and this is going to be gone soon. Yeah. And they just turned 9. So it goes fast. And so I did enjoy it. And then when I had my other little girl who is going to be 3 soon, that was so much easier. I was like, 1 baby? I was like, people complain about 1 baby? This is easy.
Right, you did it in the right order.
In the park. I did do it in the right order. So, so overall, it can be hard, but I did love it. And I think you need to give yourself grace because if you don't love it, I say that's fine. And that's why there's formula. Because it's just feed the baby. Right. Don't put so much pressure on yourself. And it's so hard. It's so hard to say that to a new mom, but it's so true. They just want to be fed. And a happy mom is so much better than a stressed out mom, a crazed mom. So I would just say that's super important. So
yeah. Okay, so Diana, tell us about your journey.
Sure. So I have 3 children. They are 9, 7, and 4. I would say my journey was a little bit different with breastfeeding. A lot of my friends had done it. My sisters had done it. My mom had breastfed me. And so I just naturally assumed that's what I should do. I didn't do a whole lot of research about it. I just knew that that's what I wanted to try to do. And so when I had my first child, I think I was just stressed always knowing that I was going to go back to work. And so when he was, just a little baby, he was born a couple of weeks early. And so we struggled early on with just kind of getting breastfeeding to work. And then within weeks, I was trying to figure out how I was going to go back to work. And so I don't feel like I ever really felt like it was a bonding experience as much as it was like something that had to be done. Like it was a task to complete. And I knew that I had to get really comfortable with the pump because that's what I was going to have to do. So I went back to work with each of my kids between 8 and 10 weeks after having them. And so it was probably by like week 2 where we were introducing bottles, supplementing with formula as needed, because that was how it was going to be. And so I kind of had joked that I make it I have like blanked that time of my life out, because just the ins and outs and making sure that you're producing and you're creating bottles, like there's so much math that goes into that.
Whether it was really necessary or not, yes.
Correct.
I totally know what you're saying.
It's like the math of like, okay, how much do I have for bottles? Okay, now make the bottles. And then it just became to the point where I was probably pumping, 4 or 5 times a day and maybe nursing once a day, because that's like all the schedule really allowed for. But even that one time that I was possibly nursing, it was the last thing I was doing at night. And so I really wasn't interested in it lasting 30 minutes long. Yeah. And so with all of my kids, I pumped / breastfed for maybe 5 to 6 months. And that was my goal. My goal was 6 months. Kind of where, Melissa, you were saying, like, you can't be crazy about it. Like, I set a goal and that was what it was going to be. And I wasn't going to go beyond that, even though I probably could have. I was ready to be done.
Yeah.
And that made you sane probably too.
Yes.
I need to get to this point and then I'm good.
And that's how I made it temporary, right?
Yeah.
That's how I made it temporary, because there was an end date.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, I mean, I guess I feel like I had all the feelings and all the experiences. I always felt like, and I don't know that this was necessarily true, but the way that I always felt was that my body was really good at making these beefy, fat babies. Like, I would birth these like big, healthy, chunky babies, but it was not very good at like feeding them once they came out. I was like, my breastfeeding was built for like a 4-pound baby. And I would always be having these like 9-pound babies. Like, it just was like in my head. I know that's not really the science behind it, but that's always how I felt. Like, I was like, so yeah, definitely the first one was like anxiety, I think. And I was kind of like built for it to not be like a beautiful breastfeeding experience, because like I was a resident, I was working 80 hours a week. And I was also like a pediatrician. It was my first baby. So I expected myself to like, obviously I was going to exclusively breastfeed, because I was in this whole environment really that like was telling me like, this is what you do. Breast milk is gold, and here's all the benefits, and here's why we should be promoting it. And I definitely agree with those things, but I think like after going through the process, I feel like maybe softening the approach would be helpful to a lot of moms.
Oh, yeah.
But at the time, I was like, obviously, like I should be able to do this. And so I felt a lot of anxiety when it wasn't going well. And so I've told this story before, but I remember when Sonu, my oldest, like one time when we were just like in the first few days, and he woke up and like, I mean, like my nipples were so sore and it was just going so badly. And he woke up and I was like legitimately afraid of him. Like I was like, because it like hurt. It was terrible. And I was like, ah. And so,
he's coming close.
I know. I was like afraid of this newborn baby. And so thankfully at that time, my husband like just said like, let's just give him some formula, give him a bottle. And we all slept for a bit and things got better. And, with him, I would say it was hard. And I breastfed some through, I don't remember exactly. Like, I would say some through his first year of life, but we supplemented quite a bit with formula. And certainly I would say in the second half of the year, he probably got mostly formula. But I do think that experience gave me at least better perspective for the other kids, because I think once we broke that seal and I felt like, my first kid had quite a bit of formula and he turned out pretty good. So this isn't really a big deal.
Yes.
So it just allowed me to have like a better perspective, where it was like, okay, well, I'm going to do this and it goes how it goes, or, and so I think that made the rest. And I think I got better with it each time. I don't think I really got any better at breastfeeding. I think that my attitude just got better. And I think that actually helps you like be better at breastfeeding is when you just relax and don't put quite so much pressure on yourself.
Absolutely.
Not that I didn't. I would say I still did, but less and less each time. And probably the last time when I was just kind of like, well, it is what it is, was probably when it went the best.
Yeah.
So for sure. So we talked, you guys kind of touched on this, which I think is like another good point to chat about, is sort of this idea of balancing you and breastfeeding, in terms of, like you said, the biggest thing is like a happy mom, or a not freaked out mom. I think that especially in like my pediatric practice was like one of my biggest takeaways, because you'd see this all the time, like all these people coming in crying, like I can't do it. And that was like the worst thing for them.
Yeah.
And so how did you guys, was there anything that you guys did or that kind of helped you have that frame of mind?
Go ahead, Diana.
I was going to say, when I was at work, I put it as a calendar invite on my own calendar, and I called it My Time.
Oh, I love it.
Pumping or just
Pumping was called My Time.
Okay.
And so I had to like create these blocks of time on my calendar so that I could make sure I was able to go to the mother's room. And so I called it My Time. And I think with the first child, I thought, like, I had these crazy ideas of, I'm just going to take a laptop and I'm just going to work and I can have conference calls. It'll be fine. Like, I'll just keep working all the way through it. And I think I realized early that was not going to be a good way for me to keep a sane mindset. And so I called it My Time. I always made sure I had books loaded on my Kindle. And like I tried to make it a time I would look forward to, like where I was just going to like check out of work for 20 minutes and I was going to just read or check Facebook or whatever. And so and then I also made sure when I was at home, I was always watching some sort of show that was like I would load it up and it was like, everyone knows don't talk to mom, especially with my younger children. Don't talk to mom. She's watching her show.
Yeah.
But really, she's watching her show while she's pumping. And I really tried to make it something that I could make positive for myself. Because as you know, I hated it.
Maybe that's a good point. You know, like everything, therefore, these like hands-free pumps and multitasking, maybe that's in some ways a hindrance, because you hear about these ladies like pumping on their way to work and you know, making lunch while they're pumping or whatever. But I never had that fancy one. I was always like tethered to the wall.
Oh, absolutely.
And, maybe that was a good thing.
Yeah.
You sit down
when I had the twins, so I breastfed and I pumped. And so when I had the twins, we didn't have that hands-free option either. But so it was kind of my little pumping, I mean, is not awesome, but it was my little escape, because then my husband would be in charge of the babies, and then I would go and I would be, again, attached to the wall, but I had like my show, my Sex and the City or whatever it was, and my snacks. And it's like, that was like my 20 minutes that I could just be without the babies. I mean, Diana, you said you were back to work, and I did not go back to work. I stayed home, which means they were always around.
Yes.
So, which is great. But, and I loved being home with them, but it was also nice to get that 15 or 20 minutes, however many times a day that I did do it, just a little bit of time away from them, and it could just be me and the pump.
Totally. Well, I think that's another point too, is I think that people have talked about this a little bit, but to me it was like very real. Like when you have very little kids, you legit get like over touched, like you want to just go in a closet and have nobody
touch me,
say mom, nobody touch you, like I'm just gonna sit here and be alone. I mean, I think that can, you know, hurt people's feelings, but I think that real. If people get to understand it, I think that that's a real thing. Like it's just overstimulation.
Absolutely.
And you just need to like
I need to be by myself.
100%.
Absolutely.
100%. Okay. So with pumping, I thought the same thing. I found it really hard when I was a resident, just because I was lucky I was a pediatrics resident, so like all of your attendings and things were like very nice about like having you be able to go pump. Obviously they promoted that, but nonetheless your actual daily schedule was not usually set where you could like block something out. So it was all trying to find like a good time to do those things. So that was a little bit stressful. But then later on when I was working in clinic, same thing. I didn't really like I would try to block out schedules, but I mean, you've been a patient at the doctor's office, things get behind and things like that. So I did find it sometimes hard, but it was nice because at work, I would just go in like one of the patient rooms and literally like everyone leaves you alone. Like there's no kids at home, you know, you're not at home where people are knocking on the door or whatever.
Absolutely.
And so same thing, I should have like, probably would have been mentally nice to really think of that as me time, but I do know that like, I wasn't sad sitting in there by myself, you know, like everyone else is working or
Make this a little longer.
you know, somebody's watching my kids. And yeah, exactly. It was like, I'm going to stay in here and pump as long as I can.
I'm not going to lie. There were times where I was like, oh, shoot, it's been 45 minutes.
What happened?
If you really put yourself in that positive headspace, like losing track of time was a real benefit.
Totally. Well, and then another, looking back, like, maybe I would do this, maybe I wouldn't, probably not now. But at the time, like, again, I was like so gung-ho about the breastfeeding, and you kind of like get all of this thinking that, you know, if you feed your baby a bottle, you should pump to like make that a feeding. Mm-hmm. It's all the math that go, you know, it's like you had this, so I should pump because they missed a feeding, and if I want to keep my supply up, which for me was like a thing I had to actively try to do. I know for some reason I would then have these like times where I would get up at night and pump, which you all know how much I slept anyway, so I have no idea why I thought this would be a good idea. But I remember, like, you're so tired. One day I would pump in my closet. I did have a big closet, so it's not as sad as it sounds, but I was in the closet, and like, I think I fell asleep, like, leaning on the wall, and I woke up, and the, like, pump had, like, leaked all over. Like, I woke up because my pants were all wet. And I remember just being devastated. Like, I dumped out all the milk.
Oh, yeah.
I got up at night to do this, and now it's just all over my pants.
Like, what? Yeah, what is happening? Why am I doing this?
So there was some sad moments of pumping, too. Or the other thing I always think of with pumping is, like, when I had older kids, like, you know, like you said, after you start kind of modest, and by the end of things you really whatever,
everything's out.
So like the other kids are coming in, and I remember they used to like dance to the pump. Do you remember? Because it's like
songs. I would start hearing things in the pump.
Totally.
I'd be like, it would be like words, and I'd be like, I hear these words in these songs, and I'm like, I'm going crazy.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
Yeah, I would too.
I'm a crazy person.
Somebody was like something about a cow or something that they would hear. It's like just this like hypnotizing. Totally. But I remember my kids coming in. Oh yeah, dude. And I was like, it's something, bonkers.
Right? Like, what is happening?
Like,
my husband kind of liked it though, because I felt I was basically topless for like this first 6 months after they were born. Like always sitting on the couch, topless. Like, always somebody coming in. Should I clothe my upper half? I don't know. I don't care.
I
at this
like
point.
He probably misses those days.
Oh, totally.
And they're usually, you know, looking pretty good.
Oh, yeah. When they're full, those babies are good. Yes, absolutely. How can we get those
like
back?
Either. I always felt like mine were like hulked out or something. Like they were so lumpy. Like, I don't know. My boobs are weird. In fact, so did either of you ever need to go to like a lactation consultant, or did you have those people visit you in the hospital? Or
I definitely was introduced with the first child to the lactation consultant at the hospital, and I think that there was like a Monday nights where you could go in, and I never did, but they would call and check on you. But I feel like by the time I had my third, like they didn't even stop by because they're like, oh, you know the deal, you're fine, you're good.
They're like, this one, she's on her third. I mean, we don't need to talk.
They
were
like literally kicking me out the door with my third child because they had a floor of first time moms that they were really working with, and so. I mean, I thought it was helpful with the first one that there was a lactation consultant to like help, and you kind of said, Missy, like helping with the twins and figuring out how it's supposed to work.
Just trying to figure it all out. But once my third came along, I do feel like with each child you get a little more confidence, and you feel like you know a little more because you've been through it. And I remember it was probably the second day after my third was born, and my milk had not come in yet. And she was like screaming bloody murder. I'm like, she is hungry. And their nurse kept pointing to her little sign that she was wearing around her neck. Her stomach is only this big, so she does not need that much milk, yada, yada. And I was like, listen, she's hungry. My milk hasn't come in. I know breastfeeding is best. I'm going to breastfeed, yada, yada. I would like some formula. And like, we were just like, listen, I am the mom. And so sometimes I do feel like you have to be an advocate for yourself and for your baby, because I'm like, this is what she needs. So I never feel like you're, stepping on anyone's toes, because she was hungry. She had that for a little bit of formula, and she was good, and all was well. Yeah. So,
do you think you would have done that the first time around?
No, absolutely not. I would have been like, oh, okay, well, she must not be hungry then. But no.
Like, listen, lady, I know how this works.
Absolutely. So if you have a feeling about something, I say go with it, because you know best.
I totally agree, because I think that was, to me, like the struggle, like coming out of sort of this medical world, where I think it comes from a good place of promoting it.
I agree.
And they talk even like so much about like being upset that they have formula in the nursery, and that they think, people will say, oh, they push it on people. And that actually has not ever been my experience. To me, it's always been a little bit the flip side, where I guess I mean, maybe like if you get some formula in the nursery, maybe you're a little less likely. But were you really going to stick with it anyway if that was all? If you were to me, you were hanging by a thread anyway.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like, if it's something you want to do, I always felt like, wouldn't it be better messaging? Not that you're pushing it on anybody,
right?
But to say like, this is an option, and we can still breastfeed. You know what I mean? But if we're in a place where everybody's stressed out, like, fed is best.
Exactly. And I had, we had said, like, I have had 2 children. I breastfed them for over a year. I'm going to breastfeed this baby. But just right now, everyone's very tense, and we're going to break here. So we're just going to need a little bit of formula, and then we'll move on.
Totally.
And then all was well. And then, she took right to breastfeeding. So sometimes, though, if you need a little jump start, like, it'll be fine.
Yeah.
It's going to be fine. Everyone will be better for it.
Well, I always feel like that was with lactation consultants. I just always felt like there's some super great ones. And I know in our clinic, we had a nurse who was a lactation consultant. She was so great, like just helping people with latches and different ways to go about it. I think is super useful. So, but I think that's the thing, is I've also had experiences where I felt like it was very anxiety provoking and like stressful, and almost like a little shaming if they were considering not to breastfeed. Yeah. And so I just think if you're in that situation, I would definitely recommend that you look elsewhere for help, because and I remember my one experience that I had personally with, like, I think the lactation people would come in while I was in the hospital, and I only really remember one. And this is probably TMI, but so she comes in and, like, whatever, you got your boob out, you're going to do the latch. And apparently she felt like my nipple was weird, because she says, but I can work with just about anything. And I thought,
well, I am feeling pretty good about myself right about now.
Me stuff to feel self-conscious about. I hadn't even occurred to me. I can work with just about anything. I was like,
good. I'm glad my misshapen nipples will be okay for my child.
Okay. So I was done with her.
Send in the next one, please.
Yeah. You didn't work with anybody? You said just.
Well, I mean, the lady right after my first one was born was in, and she was really helpful, just with the latching, how to hold the baby.
Yeah.
I think that none of us really realize that it's like they don't just naturally know how to do it. It's like there's like this whole like stuffing
there is
of your breast
Nobody
into
realizes
their mouth.
That. And not just like, boop, it's in. It's like, get that
whole
it
doesn't feel natural
in there.
at all. You're like, his mouth's open, and you're like,
go. Put that whole thing in there. It's eye-opening.
I think so. I think that fish game,
totally.
But I think you need someone that first time to be like, this is what you do. Like, this isn't going to choke your child.
Yes.
Like, this is, you kind of got to be a little aggressive with getting this latch to work. And so I definitely think there's a real benefit to the consultants helping in the hospital.
I agree.
But then I agree too. I think if you say early on, like, you're going to breastfeed, I do think that there could be some guilting if you're trying to supplement in the hospital, which we did with all 3 of ours. We supplemented in the hospital also, because, well, I don't think we did so much with our first one, and then we learned with our second and third, like, why did we not supplement right away? while we were figuring things out.
That's what they need. You needed that. They needed that. Absolutely.
Because I understand like the theory, like every time you do that, that's like one less time practicing breastfeeding. But if you, I mean, on the flip side, I think in real life experience, those times where you're like, well, if I just give him a little formula, suddenly he's not freaking out and I'm not panicking, and it just kind of brings the anxiety level like.
Right. It's a calming experience versus an anxiety-ridden experience.
Exactly. Yeah. You were like a producer,
I had pretty good production, especially for twins. I did have to supplement though with a little bit of formula. So it was a lot of times it was like, half and half or 3/4 breast milk, and then so there was mostly breast milk, but I did supplement, and I was totally okay with it. And then I actually supplemented a little bit too with my last one. So I feel like as long as the breast milk is in there, they're getting all the good things. Yeah. So it's fine. That's why they have formula,
like some
right?
is better than none. And none is still fine.
And it allowed me too, like to have like a date night or just go out for like an hour or two. And so luckily all of my children, they breastfed, but they also took bottles. So it allowed me like time to maybe get away. And so I always like to have a little stash in the freezer. And if I didn't have enough breast milk, like it was nice to be able to like supplement a little bit with the formula just so you get some time to
I just remember being so jealous of like the freezer people.
Oh,
like I remember if I would get like 4 ounces that I was like, I might have to freeze this.
I was pretty proud when you'd open up that freezer and it's like I have my nice little stacks all in a row.
There were no rows.
I was like, oh, we're looking good in here, ladies. Looks like a Target run is coming. Yes, absolutely.
What about you?
I block it out. So you ask these questions, and I'm like, shit.
I love this.
I think
response to trauma.
I definitely was not with my first one. I was not a producer, and we supplemented, but he was also just eating a ton, and I don't know that any normal person could have kept up with him because I think at like 3 months he was probably eating like 40 ounces a day, and I think that's kind of a lot.
Yeah.
But then I remember as you were talking about the freezer, I feel like with my second one, when I went back to work, I was so proud of the freezer stash, but then he wouldn't eat anything that was frozen. And so we went through this whole, we went through this whole,
what is this frozen?
Like, trying to mix frozen and fresh, trying to mix frozen. I mean, and it was just like, he would just not do it. And so then it became like, I don't want to freeze anyway because it's going to go to waste. And so then you're like, how long can it be in the fridge? Again, more inventory. You're doing the inventory of like, how long has it been there? Got to use a first in, first out method. I'm an accountant.
See, and I am the worst at that. I'd be like, honey, where are we with this one?
Yeah. So I feel like it was just like, even when you felt like you had an inventory, which I didn't usually have, and it didn't have much in the freezer, I still wasn't real sure how it was going to be used or if the baby would even eat it. Yeah. So, but I was also like you, jealous of the people that'd be like, I just ran out of room in my deep freeze.
Yeah, like I had to donate it all off because, even if I had 7 babies, they could never make it through all this. And I was like, but my sister-in-law did educate me. Apparently that's like a kind of a problem is being an overproducer that I never really understood. They're like, they have to pump because it's like so much. Right. I was like, well, when I looked at it from that perspective, I can see that as like a burden. Like I fed and I'm still like needing to pump because that feeling when you do need to pump, I always called it like the milk sweats because you get like all hot. Yeah. Like, cause I remember like being like in clinic and I kind of have missed my time. I was supposed to pump. People are talking to me and I'm just like,
breathe through it.
Like on fire here. So it's like legit. So I imagine like if that was how you felt even when you were normally doing that. So I don't mean to like belittle that at all when I say I'm jealous, but I at the time I was like, well, that must be nice.
Right. Yeah, totally.
I'm like eking out 2 ounces. I'm like, yeah. Go me. So anyway, so do you guys does anything come to mind in terms of just like awkward or weird breastfeeding stories that you have? Maybe you don't remember any of them.
I block them out.
I do have a funny story, and we did catch it on video because I always think back to it when our twins were little, and they were at this point they were walking because I probably stopped breastfeeding around 13 months, but so when you have twins, I had this giant pillow because they each had to be on one side. So you had this huge pillow. It had a big old buckle. It was just ridiculous. So anyway, whenever at this point when they're, 9, 10 months old, when I'd pull out the pillow, we have this video, they'd get these huge grins on their faces and they come like toddling over like, here we go. Like, it's time for the ride or whatever it is. And they'd come over and jump on. And it was just... And toward the end, I was like, this is just obscene. Like, we got to end this. Like, this is outrageous, right? Like, how is this inappropriate now? I feel like, should I be naked in front of you guys?
Excited. No.
So I always remember that because it was just kind of sweet. Like, they were so excited. It was such a good, like, special time toward the end. And, it would just, in the beginning, they would just stay there forever.
Yeah.
Sometimes, but then it would be like, they're on, they're off. It was quick and dirty. And... And I just remember that was fun. I do remember that toward the end because I was like, well, I'm going to miss this. In the beginning, you kind of hated it here and there. Be like, oh, I'm going to miss this.
Yeah.
But
so you did like both at the same time,
both at the same
whole
time. One time, so it was such an ordeal at night. And so one time I'm like, I'm going to try it. I'm going to try one, like they say. So one got up because I would feel bad. One would wake up, so I'd have to wake the other one up to put him on. So just one woke up, so I put him on. We did our business, put him back to bed. I got all snuggly in my bed, and the other one woke up right after. And
just
I'm like,
yep, they said.
Yep, all right, back to always at the same time. So,
lesson learned.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, but I always did feel bad waking up the other one.
Oh, sure.
But I mean, whatever. You get into a routine, and they're fine. It all worked
Well,
out.
really, I mean, I would have been terrible at that because I think I would have been really bad about that, and I just would have died probably. So God bless you for having twins.
You do what you have to do.
You do.
Like, I didn't know any different. I had the
true.
two right at the beginning, so that was my normal. That was what I did.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think the other thing that you said earlier about like keeping the perspective that this is temporary.
Yes.
Like part of me hates saying that out loud because like I feel like when people would say that to you at
it's
the time,
annoying.
you'd be like,
you're like, really?
But now I find myself saying all those things because it is. I'm like, you're like, okay, it is true.
I know.
Like if you just everything feels like it's gonna stay the way it is forever.
Especially when it's so hard.
It is.
It's hard to like get out of that. And I find myself telling my 9-year-old twins now, like, I know right now this feels hard. And I'm like, oh, how annoying. But it's so true, right? Like, in that season, this is terrible and awful. But I'm like, you have to just think differently about it. And it's better when you think positive about it.
Totally.
When you put a positive spin, like, oh, this might be the last time, or it's going to get better.
Or the fact that some of that stuff didn't really matter as much as that's maybe the bigger thing is like it was like, oh, I have to breastfeed, which bottles are the best, which I need this special carrier,
and it all doesn't matter now. I don't think any of that would matter. We were probably rolling around on the floor with our parents.
Totally.
We are just fine.
Totally.
And all of it has been evacuated from our house. All of these things that were just like such important items for us to have and like researched, and you have to have the best. Mm-hmm. And I think I said this to you earlier that the first thing that went out of my house with the baby zone was over. Like the day after I was done pumping, the pump was gone. Mm-hmm. Like the parts were gone. All of the like nursing stuff was gone. Like it just, we had to have it, but then I was so much happier getting rid of all of it, if I'm honest, because we're in a better stage of life now.
Yes.
Well, I love that about you too, because I just feel like it's so like I'm not sure my pump might still be on a shelf. I'd have to look,
just
but if
you get the itch,
just in case,
pull that baby out.
Still works at the dance party with the kids, but
yes, because of the dance.
I love you that you're like, it is done today, and
we are done.
We have
it can go to a better home. I have a friend that needs it. It will go to a better home. We're great.
I love it. And did you have ever any like crazy stories that you can remember?
I kind of feel like Missy saying that the kids dancing up to her when they were 9 months old and getting on the pillow. I don't know that can really be beat. So no, I don't really remember anything crazy. Again, like I was also very much like very private about it. So I don't ever remember even wanting to nurse in public. Like if I wasn't at my home, I didn't really want to nurse. And so I do remember there being times where like I had to go out to the car
Yeah.
Or I remember pumping in my car and like making sure like we had an outlet in our car because you could never trust the battery packs of those things.
Right.
And so, there were like some hot, sweaty days where I was like pumping in the car or feeding the baby in the car, and then like just dealing with all of the stuff that comes along with that. But I don't remember anything like just really funny or crazy about it. But again, I try to block it out.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the other point. Like, do you think that you would be the same like way now? Like, let's just say.
No, and I think with each kid, I was progressively less anxious about it and less controlled about it. My third one was definitely a much better experience. And I think now, like if I, again, knowing like it will end and this is a temporary time of life, I definitely think I would be easier about it now.
Totally. And the other thing, like the breastfeeding in public thing, I definitely like got more comfortable with it kid after kid, like you said. But I feel like now I would just be like, whatever.
Right? Like, if you want to look, fine.
Yeah.
I mean,
like, what's wrong with you?
right?
You know, what's wrong with this?
Yes.
Because I think back to like, you think, I just always think you would always have this like blanket.
Yes.
And then for your kid would be
the
like,
baby would
moving
be
it
all
out of the
sweaty,
way.
and you're sweaty, and it's just a whole mess
you lift up
happening
their
under
little
there.
hairs all matted down because they're all sweaty. And
I know.
Like,
I know. Try eating under a blanket.
God.
Right? How depressing.
No. So that I had given thought to. And like I said, like I would still, because we had to, once you've got like multiple kids, you know, sometimes that's actually the best thing you can do with the baby is feed it.
Yeah.
Just so it calms down and the rest of them, you know, but for sure. I think now as I look back, I used to always like worry so much about that. And not like I'd just be like hanging out topless at my house. You know, if you come over, this is how we do.
This is what we do.
But at the same time, I feel like that would be something that, like, I feel like I hope the wave of the future is maybe a little, like, more comfort with that.
And I do feel like it is that way. And even when you go places, I've noticed so many more, like, mother rooms.
Yes.
Like, where was that? We were at the pumpkin patch this year, and
Yes.
I'm like, they have a mother room now. Like, how great is that?
So great.
And that was not like that. And I feel like that's so much nicer. It's so...
This is why I was pumping in the car.
Yeah,
For
so you were
places
in the
like that.
bathroom.
Right.
And now
Right.
there's in airports too, like there's so many more options, which is, it's just necessary and needed. So that's nice to see.
I love it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the next section of our podcast is Ask Me Anything. So I have a couple of listener questions. The first one is from Cassie. She says, I am pregnant with my first and plan on breastfeeding. My siblings and I were formula fed, and I don't really have any friends with babies, so I'm a little nervous about how it will go. As a seasoned mother who has breastfed, what tips do you have for a new mom just starting out?
I would say definitely going with the mindset that this is what I want to do, but if it doesn't work, it's going to be okay. And I think if she has a husband or a partner, make sure that they know that too, because I feel like when you're exhausted, you kind of feel like you're going crazy sometimes. So when you have somebody who can say, like, it's okay if you do this, or just the support, I just feel like support goes a long way when you're exhausted and tired and just out of ideas and thoughts. So having a good support system for sure, and just trying your best. And if it doesn't go that way, then it's okay. Because all the baby wants at that point is your love and just to have a full tummy. And that's it. Yeah. So I would say going in with that is the way to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I'm glad you brought up the support system because I feel like that's a big part of it too. Is when I talk about trying to make it a more positive experience and trying to, call it my time or call it my time with the baby. Also, that really works if your support system is on board with that being part of what you're trying to do. But I completely agree that it's about trying to just make sure that you're not putting too much pressure on yourself. The baby will be fed. And it is okay if it's with formula.
Totally.
That's why they make it.
Right.
It's supposed to go in the baby.
Well, and I used to always say, like, you can't tell it. I'm sure there's plenty of formula-fed kids at Harvard.
Right.
So I say that all the time. And, like, my kids got varying degrees of breast milk versus formula. And I couldn't say I could attribute anything to who got what. Like,
exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's no obvious outcome.
Yeah.
So I think same thing, just like do your best to chill out. Know that this is, it feels like the end all be all for you right now, but it actually is not.
It's not. It's only the beginning.
It is. Actually, this is not the hardest thing you will do.
I have 2 9-year-olds now. That is no big deal.
Right, exactly. You want to give me a quiet newborn to feed? Sounds good. No.
As long as they're not up in the middle of the night.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, there's that. You will be up in the middle of the night, and that's okay too.
Right? That's a whole nother.
And that was something I was thinking. I always felt like in the middle of the night was the hardest because I'm always like, everybody's sleeping. My husband's sleeping next to me. Like, everybody's sleeping, and I'm the one that's up with a crying baby. But just think how many other moms or people are up at that time with babies too. And it just makes you feel better.
I feel like you told me this.
Yes.
You told me this.
It makes me feel better.
Actually,
You're like, I'm not the only one doing this right now.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think you told me that once, and it literally, like, psychologically helped me.
Yeah,
because I don't know why, but you were like, you'd be up feeding this baby, and if you just sat and you were like, how many moms all over the place, like all over town, are just up doing the same thing? And I don't know why, but it was like,
right, here we are.
power to the sisters. We're up doing our thing. Totally.
Yeah.
It sounds silly, but I think that's...
Hey, whatever helps.
Right? And any other advice?
I guess as we were talking also about kind of that middle of the night, I think for me, that was also the thing that I needed to figure out early. Like, how am I going to handle middle of the night? Is my husband going to get up with us? Am I going to pump? Am I going to nurse? Because
that's a good point.
if I had a decent night's sleep, the rest of the day was a lot better. So if you are breastfeeding, figure out what you're going to do at night.
Totally.
And what's your schedule, and who's putting the baby to bed, and how does that all work?
And that's a really good point too, because I feel like sometimes couples can get into it when they're like, well, I'm the one up all night, and it can be a whole thing. So going into it, I knew, so my husband would work at the hospital, and so I know that he needed to sleep at night because he would have shifts all day long. So I knew I would be doing it at night, and it was fine because I was nursing, like he couldn't really help anyway. So I knew that, so I never was mad at him or angry with him or had this like underlying tension because I knew that's how it was, and he would help me in other ways. So I feel like if you figure that out too before you go into it, you can kind of save yourself some rifts in the marriage. Yeah.
Well, knowing yourself, like, are you a person that doesn't do well with sleep?
Right.
Like, if you're missing sleep, and be honest with yourself, because I think that's, some people do better than others with sleep deprivation. And I mean, then that is another benefit of either pumping or using formula, is it allows like a spouse or partner to help with nighttime feedings.
Absolutely.
So I think exactly right is like having a game plan, communicate your needs, your wants.
Absolutely. Don't
and
keep
I think
it inside.
It's nice for the like spouses to get involved. Like, you know, it can be kind of like sad with babies when your job is to just change diapers.
Right.
Right. And maybe like I said, that was my bonding time when I would breastfeed the kiddos. But so it was nice for him to have some bonding time. However, it looked to him to have his special time with the kids too.
Yeah,
right?
totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. So our next, I did actually have one tip that someone else gave me. I didn't use this, but I felt like she swears by it, so I was going to pass it on, because I told you about like how terrible my nipples always got torn up. Probably because they're freakish, according to maybe they're just weird,
and
that's
also
why
have
I always
nipples. Don't you fret. Oh yes,
apparently
yes.
But she swore by like cherry chapstick.
Cherry,
because she said it would help the baby latch.
Interesting.
Because they like the taste or something.
Wow,
and then she would just like cherry chapstick those suckers. So she said anytime she knows somebody having a baby, she gets them like a Sam's pack of like cherry chapstick. So I can't speak to it personally, but I was like,
well,
it's pretty good.
Yeah.
All that, like, I would use all that lanolin crap.
Cream. Oh yeah.
I don't think that did anything but make a mess.
I know. I was smothering whatever worked.
And it would like grease up the inside of your bras. You'd have these like grease stains in there. And I was
then
like,
there were the
this is
pads
gross.
for the grease.
Oh my God, yes.
To keep the grease off of your bra.
Which also, if your nipples are bleeding, stick to you.
Oh,
I will
and
also
then
tell you that you have to rip
it's
that
like a Band-Aid,
off.
like a Band-Aid off of a scab. Good times.
So sexy. So sexy. So the next question's from Tara. It's kind of along the same lines, but if you were having a baby right now, besides all of this, the therapy you would need, what would you do differently?
I think I would just try to approach it a lot calmer than I did. I was not one to read a lot, and I didn't get myself all worked up. I really tried to not go read WebMD like at all.
Yeah.
I tried to stay really, really calm, but I think just when it's new and when you realize that you have this person, little baby depending on you, it's hard to not get really worked up over all of it.
Yeah.
And so I think now with like the perspective of I have 3 healthy kids, I could be a lot calmer, but I know that that's easier said than done, because when it is your first, it's really hard to not get wrapped up into it.
Yeah, and I would, kind of touching on that too, I would just say I wouldn't listen to like all the noise. Like listen, read the information you want to, or the facts that you want to gain, but there can be so much noise from like your mother-in-law or your mom or Sally or
Social media.
Social media, this is what you need to do. Don't listen to the noise. Don't pay attention to the noise. Again, like what's best for you, your baby, and your body. And that's all that matters. Like all of that stuff just does not matter. And just don't pay attention to it. Try to just like shut it off. Just like, because when people take social media breaks, they feel so much better. I feel like it's the same thing. Just like shut the noise down, I would say.
Because I can't even imagine now, like, because I feel like social media existed, but not like...
Right.
It wasn't to the height it is right now. And so I feel like I could imagine, you're getting ready to have this baby and you follow all of these like, Earth Mama, natural pregnancy people or whatever. And then I feel like you could definitely see how that would make you have even more pressure on yourself, or give you like an even more negative view when suddenly like, because we used to also always joke, with birth plans that like, the length of your birth plan, the longer it is, the more likely you are to have a C-section. Like, it's just like seems to be the way that it goes. So I feel like it's the same kind of thing. Like it's sort of like setting yourself up.
Yes.
To be disappointed in yourself.
Yes. Yeah. Especially that's a good point too with your birth plan. Not getting too crazy with it. I mean, mine was like, let's just see how it goes and then get the epidural.
Right.
So I'm like, that's probably just going to have to happen. But just go easy on yourself.
Yeah. Like be flexible.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I was thinking, so what I would probably do differently among a lot of things, but in terms of breastfeeding, so I would actually probably have done more like co-sleeping than I did. And I know exactly like this is a product of, being in medicine, and like I was totally like taught all the information. The safest place for your baby to sleep is like in a crib by itself, on its back, nothing in the crib, all the things, right? And so like that's what we learned. That's what we told other people. And there's actually like, this guy has done like a ton. James McKenna, he did this like mother-baby sleep lab. And so he's actually for years done this research where he took like breastfeeding moms and their babies and like hooked them up to all the like polysomnography and did all the sleep studies. And they actually like sleep differently than normal people. So, or people that aren't a infant or a breastfeeding mom. And it's actually like a state of lighter sleep, but that's actually like protective for the child for SIDS. So it's very responsive. It promotes like better breastfeeding because the baby's right there.
Right.
I mean, everything has its pluses and minuses, but you all know how horrible all my sleeping. So my kids, like, I was not a sleep trainer. I didn't do that.
I'm right there with you.
Right? So I never did that. And, like, my kids just always woke up. And, I kind of learned through actually, like, doing more research in his things. That's actually, like, it makes sense once you hear about it. It's, like, a very healthy response. Like, a baby in nature, like an animal baby, is not supposed to be, like, left alone in a box somewhere. Like, no other creature does that. Like,
swaddled in the crib.
Puts their baby over here and then sleeps over here. Yes. And so it's like a very natural response for your baby to like wake up and be like, where the hell are you?
Where's that nipple?
Right, exactly. And so like, as you think about it, like, evolutionarily or whatever, you're like, okay, that makes sense. And so Diana likes to laugh because in that sleep deprived state, you have like no freaking clue what's happening. And so I used to always be like, yeah, my kids are shitty sleepers. And then people would be like, well, how many times did you get up last night? I'd be like, I have no idea. So one night I was like, fine, I'm just going to like actually like keep my phone with me and like write down in the little notes like how often I woke up. And I remember it was like 7 p.m. where we were like putting all the kids to bed, and it was like with my fourth. So this should have been like my best go at it. I was good at it now. And like literally it was like every 20 minutes at first. Like she would wake up and stir, I'd nurse her. And then what would really happen is that like, because I had her in the pack and play at that time in our room, and I would go like to the recliner, and what really was happening is that the only time she would sleep, she never would sleep in the pack and play. The only times that she'd sleep for more than like 30 minutes was usually where I had fallen asleep in the recliner with her. So we'd get like a good 2 hours or something of sleep, and then I would wake up in the recliner, which really is like probably the least safe of all the options, really. I mean, I'm surprised I never dropped a baby. You know, I told you about the pump. But so I would wake up in the recliner, and then it would be like, put her back in pack and play. And then 20 minutes later, it was like, back up to the recliner. And then the only time I got a chunk of sleep was like 4 hours when it was brought her to bed with me, and then we slept. And so like looking back, like knowing that research is there for me, I feel like that would have been like a much healthier option. Like I would have gotten more than 1 hour blocks of sleep. I agree with you,
because I feel like my twins were terrible sleepers. So then when my last little girl came along, I was like, I'm going to take like a sleep training course, because I was always terrible with the twins. I took the course. I'm doing all the things. I am just not built to sleep train a child. I mean, so she'll be 3 in January. She'll still get up here and there once a night. And at this point, I'm like, whatever, it's fine. I'm just not good at it.
No,
I just
me
can't do it. And the cry it out thing and all of it, I just can't. So whatever works for you, I'm fine. It's fine.
I mean,
I will sleep one day. It is fine.
Someday. Well, I will say, see, my youngest just turned 7, and I sleep all night.
See, I have that to look forward to.
Exactly. It will happen. It'll just be a very tiring, 7 years.
Yeah.
See, and on the other hand, I think about the advice I got from my grandmother, who's 98 years old.
Okay.
She said, you just put the baby in the hallway.
Those ladies knew what they were talking about.
They knew what they were doing, because it was, you know, with our first one, you have this pack and play or the bassinet like right next to your bed, right? Like we weren't putting the baby in the bed with us, but it was like we could hear everything that was happening. Yeah. And so I remember talking to her, and she's like, well, you don't have to go directly from your bedroom to the crib. Like there's intermittent steps, and like you just put the baby in the hallway. And so I would tell people that, like, we just would move the bassinet to like the other side of the room, and then to the hallway, and then to their room, and then eventually to the crib.
Gradually.
Yeah. But that was from my grandmother. It was like, you just put the baby like wherever it is that like you don't have to hear them, but you're close enough.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good point too, because I actually think that speaks to this guy's research. Is you're in a lighter state of sleep, so probably like I had this pack and play next to your bed. That might be the absolute worst. Yeah. In terms of that, because if they're like already in bed with you and like just can latch themselves on, they probably can do that without you even waking up. Right. And if they're in the other room and you don't hear every like grunt, rustle, then you can sleep. Right? Yeah. But it's like that, like in between where it's like every little noise wakes you up, and you still have to like get up, get them up. Like,
right. And then you're waiting for them to wake up, right? Oh, like you might wake up waiting for them to wake up.
And when they finally do sleep longer periods of time, you're awake because you're like, why are they not awake?
Yeah, you think they've died.
Did they die? Are they breathing? It's a shit show.
Absolutely.
It's amazing, but it's also a shit show.
Well, any other words of advice, words of wisdom from two of my favorite seasoned moms?
Man, long pause by us.
I honestly, like, I would say, like, my most favorite thing is being a mom. Like, I do feel like I was built for it at times, not so much. I mean, we fail at little parts all the time, but I do love it, and I do feel like it's such a reward to see, you know, you have them the whole way. We were just talking about the birth story, and then just to see where they've come and the people that they become, and hoping, just hoping that you're doing a good job and you're trying your best. And honestly, just that you get to raise these little people and show them all this love, and hopefully you are teaching them to make themselves happy and to love other people, and hopefully you're just like putting these other really great people out in the world is what I'm hoping. And it is fun to see. There are moments. There will always be moments, but I'm always trying to look at the positive and the good side of it. So,
And I think very little of that develops from any breast or bottle feeding choice.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right?
So you're good there.
Oh, you're looking at me now.
Yeah. Diana's words of
Melissa's
wisdom.
got so much great stuff to say.
Oh, yeah.
Again, like, and I block out the baby stage, but part of that was because I really enjoy older kids. Like the
Yeah.
ages that my kids are now, like the 9-year-old is like perfect. And I just love the things that he's doing and how he is as a student, how he is as a friend. 4-year-old, we still have some tests. She's a little girl, so we're still going through some tests, but I absolutely agree. It's really about like the people that they're becoming. And the baby phase is something that it's fun, it's nurturing, it's a good time to build that first bond, but it's really about the people that they become.
I agree.
Love it.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks for tuning in for another episode of Feeding the Family. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and catch us next Monday for another great episode. Thank you.